What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with week 9 of the NFL season. Last week, we had a really good discussion around value. We'll kind of talk around similar things this week, and we'll just kind of see where this discussion takes us. So let's hop into the cheat sheet here for a second, and we're going to start with quarterbacks. And what we're starting to see is a trend here, right? We're starting to see Jared Goff, Alex Smith, Cam Newton, like these guys seem to always be the highest projected values of the slate. But quite honestly, it's pretty razor thin. Like the difference between Jared Goff being projected at 4.3 times his value and Drew Brees, the fourth most valuable quarterback in my projections at 4.06. I mean, it's pretty small. The top 10 guys are, Joe Flacco's in 10th with, a projection of 3.8 times value compared to Jared Goff at 4.3. And I think this actually opens up a little bit of a bigger discussion around value for quarterbacks and how it's kind of evolved in the last couple of years. So I think if you would have asked me even last season or the year before, I almost always would have not paid up for quarterback. There were just better, cheaper options that could score points. Guys could go off. And while we still see some of that this year, I'm actually going to show you this just to kind of illustrate this. So Patrick Mahomes, who is pretty clearly the league's MVP, is $7,100 this week. If you just go back, and I'm just pulling up the game logs for quarterbacks for 2017, 2016, and 2015. Like if you look at this, there are plenty of quarterbacks routinely priced over $7,100. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Andrew Luck were always $8,000 or more, $8,300, $8,500. I'm scrolling pretty far down the list before I get to anyone who is $7,100. Like we're literally talking, what's this, 100, 200 quarterbacks in 3 seasons that are priced more than what the absolute like stone nuts MVP is right now. I mean, Carson Palmer, and obviously we don't remember these matchups, but some of the names that were 7,100 in the last couple of years, like Eli Manning, Tony Romo, Carson Palmer, Ben Roethlisberger. I guess a lot of these are situational depending on the matchup that week, but you saw me, if you're on the video, you saw me scroll through how many different quarterbacks before we got down to this price range. And if you go to 6,600, so Mahomes is 7,100 this week, Cam Newton 66. If you go down to 66, I mean, we're talking bottom of the barrel quarterbacks in the last couple of years, right? Like these guys are, what would their prices be this year? Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Kirk Cousins, Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, not all these are bad, and we're looking at them kind of all in one instead of week by week in the matchups and what they were, but you can see how the pricing has changed on quarterbacks. And it's almost getting to the point where you should probably just pay up for these guys. Like the fact that Patrick Mahomes is $7,100 is pretty insane if we pull up what he's actually done this year. All right. I mean, he hasn't scored what? He hasn't scored less than 20 points in any game. He hasn't scored less than 25 in, all but one. He scored 30, 32, and 32 in each of the last 3 weeks, which has been almost routine for him. So it's just really a situation where you're probably just able to pay up for quarterback and take anybody that you want, as long as you're kind of picking the right person to pair him with. So as far as this week goes, just to kind of like use that as a little bit of a foundation to this, we'll talk about some of these guys that I think are more interesting than others. Cam Newton, the matchup with Tampa Bay is just absolutely drool-worthy. You can see they've got the second highest projected total or implied total from Vegas this week. They're 7-point favorites. 54 points is the over-under. Would I be concerned? Like usually in this situation, we'd love to take a running back, right? High total, large favorite. We'd look for Christian McCaffrey. But let me show you this real quick. And I've got the Carolina Panthers in here as far as my production shares go. And just looking at rush attempts. So right now we're looking at rush attempts for the entire season. Christian McCaffrey's got 92 attempts. Cam Newton has 62. Like already he's carved out such a huge chunk of his team's rushing volume. But if you actually look at the last couple weeks, if you start to just go, okay, weeks 4 through 8, McCaffrey leads 46-34. Weeks 5 through 8, oh, they had to buy one of those weeks. Here we go. 6 through 8. So actually the last 3 weeks, McCaffrey only leads 29-26. We have a quarterback who is basically getting the number one running back volume on his team over the course of the last 3 weeks. Not to mention, he's throwing the ball 35 times a game. And not to mention, he gets most of the goal line work. I mean, the Tampa Bay, he's going to be absolute chalk. We know it. I know it. But for good reason. I'm trying to point out what an incredible level of volume that Cam Newton's dealing with right now. One guy that I think is actually interesting too is Kirk Cousins, who I feel like is flying a bit underneath the radar. And I don't know if it's the Adam Thielen stuff. It's just like every time you talk about the Vikings, it's Thielen's going nuts or Latavius Murray's going nuts, and like no one's ever really talking about Kirk Cousins, despite the fact that he's been pretty stinking solid all year, right? I mean, hasn't had any real dud games. Has shown an ability to go out and score in bunches. So first couple weeks of the year, let's see, dropped 37 on Green Bay, 35 on the Rams. He's been solid since then. He put up 24 against the Saints last week. And now he's playing at home. Detroit is basically like a bottom 8 team against defenses. And Minnesota, where do they check in here? Oh, yeah. Vegas implied total of 27 points, a 50-point total, and 4-point favorites. So those would be the guys I'm probably most interested in at the quarterback position. All right, I really don't know what to say about Todd Gurley anymore, right? I mean, we can pull up his player profile here. I don't think he scored less than like 25 DraftKings points in any week this season. Let's see. Yeah, he hasn't. No worse than 25 in any week. He's broken 34 straight games, as many as 39 a handful of weeks ago. Now you get him in probably the game where he's got the highest total of his career. I don't know. That's a guess. 60 points. I assume that's probably the highest total. I'm not sure why he's not more. He's $9,500. If we were rostering him in a week where he was like 10,000, which I think was this week here, week 6, why would we not play him at $9,500? It's not like the Saints are, I mean, Vegas thinks they're going to give up 30 points, right? Play Todd Gurley. On the other side of that game, we finally got that Alvin Kamara, target and volume that we were kind of expecting, right? So 13 carries, which we prefer that be closer to like 16, 17, but 8 targets, right? Scored a touchdown on both sides of it, scored 26 fantasy points. Really good opportunity to catch him on the upside here as his price gets back up to the top tier running back situation. And you see Nick Chubb is in here as my number 1 ranked value, and actually Alvin Kamara is number 2. Gurley's number 4, which is crazy considering he's 9,500, but that's what the model thinks of him. But I also think there is like James Conner is super interesting, right? So I guess Le'Veon's not coming back. It's now past the trade deadline. He hasn't reported. Probably not playing. Certainly not playing this week. Here's James Conner. Last 3 weeks, 37, 31, and 41 DraftKings points. He's only $7,200. He's basically priced as running back 7, actually below Le'Veon Bell, which is kind of funny. But the problem here is the matchup. And it's Baltimore. And he's faced Baltimore already once this year and laid an egg. It was right here, week 4, 7.4 DraftKings points, his worst game of the season. So now this is a dilemma. Do we believe in matchup? Do we believe in usage? It's a guy who might get 30 touches in against anybody. That's probably pretty good. He's only $7,200. But how concerned are we about this Baltimore defense? I'll let you guys tell me. Shoot me a comment below. Tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand. What are we doing with this, 2 huge momentum items of someone who is as scorching hot about to run into the worst possible matchup that he could get? Tell me what you think. And then finally, my 5th ranked in terms of value running back is Tevin Coleman, who's pretty interesting at the moment. So Falcons were on a bye last week. Week prior to that, we were a little bit concerned that Ito Smith might be too heavily involved in this offense, but Tevin Coleman rushes for 11 times for 50 yards, scores a touchdown, caught a couple more balls. Basically split. So Ito Smith rushed 7 times compared to Coleman's 11. But this is a situation now where his price dropped from 5,700 to 4,800. They've got the extra week. It's at Washington. Like this price is just like when guys drop that much, I tend to, perk my ears up a little bit. So he actually projects well for me as well. I have him about 2.5 times value, which is my 5th best projection. And what's he need to do that? 10, 15, no, 12 and a half fantasy points to do that. He scores 15 points, he gets you 3 times value. Pretty interesting. For wide receivers and tight ends, we're just going to get to the heart of it here, right? So here's targets over the course of the last 3 weeks. Jarvis Landry leading the way. Let's see. I think there's actually a couple of interesting things in here. So Alshon Jeffrey is like 8th on this list with 27 targets, but the Eagles just acquired Golden Tate. So assuming he suits up this week, we'll see what happens with that. And then you also get someone like, where's Emmanuel Sanders? I thought I just saw his name somewhere. Here he is. He's down here at 21, but now Demaryius Thomas gone. I wonder if a few more trickle to Emmanuel Sanders, or if they're just going to end up going to Cortland Sutton, who's going to be one of the more popular plays of the week. He was already kind of establishing himself as a big part of this offense, or at least a fine part of this offense. And now DT's gone. Okay, so now we're gonna get to see what this kid's got. Who else? Julio Jones. I mean, talking about Falcons, he's basically 10th in targets over the course of the last 3 weeks, and one of those was a bye. So, wow, yeah, that's nice. Trying to find. Here's Golden Tate's targets over the last 2 weeks, 18 of them, which now have to be transferred out to Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones Jr., and anybody else who might want to pick up the slack. Who else we got here? Nothing too interesting. I do want to go back to my cheat sheet and look at my values here. Oh, yeah, look at it. Oh, my God. Okay, so I have not looked at this yet. I'm applauding my model, right? Because Cortland Sutton, my number 2 projected value. Kenny Golladay, my number 3. These are now post those trades, so that makes a lot of sense. Actually, both Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas pop up here now because they're no longer kind of splitting. They're together here, so that's very interesting that the model adjusted itself. I just refreshed this before I started. That's pretty cool. Who else do we have here in some value? Brandon Cooks. Okay, yeah, no surprise. 60-point ball game. Michael Crabtree against Pittsburgh. That could be interesting. Hang tight. Pittsburgh's allowed basically the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wideouts. I'm trying to see if there's anything of note here. Crabtree's played pretty well. I mean, he's only scored 1 touchdown this year. 1 touchdown. I mean, since week 2, he's only scored 1 touchdown. But plenty of yards. This could be interesting. He's only $4,800. That game could be a sneaky little play there for Michael Crabtree. All right, let's see what else we have here. Actually, go back to tight ends for a second. And we'll just kind of keep our range. Yeah, I mean, Zach Ertz continues to just rack up targets. Isn't he insane? Let's see who else we have here. No one that we haven't talked about, quite honestly. Unfortunately, David Njoku. So David Njoku, who everyone loved because literally was just like leading all tight ends in targets over the course of the last 3-4 weeks, goes out and puts up a literal goose egg. Not a single target. Lost people a lot of money, I think. You can get the chance to bounce back now and buy him again. Imagine how many jaded owners there's going to be for David Njoku this week. This game against Kansas City, I imagine Baker Mayfield's throwing the ball quite a bit in this one. They're going to be pretty significant favorites, or I'm sorry, pretty significant underdogs. So if you want to buy back on Njoku, you have my blessing. Other than that, it's pretty weak. The tight end position is always pretty lame. Let me just look through the lobby here real quick and just make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. What about the Tampa Bay situation? Now with Fitzpatrick on their center, much more efficient to guys like OJ Howard, who's now scored 16 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. There's the 2 weeks he caught a touchdown. Obviously, he's gobbled up 17 targets over the course of the last 3 weeks from various QBs. That's some Winston, some Fitzpatrick. So you could get me to play him as well. All right, that's it. Let me know what you think. Tweet me. It's at TFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Later.